Mike Zinner is the Mosley Professor of Surgery at Harvard Medical School and the Surgeon-in-Chief at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Clinical Director of the Dana-Farber Brigham and Women's Cancer Center. He's been there since 1994, and I knew him before that when I joined his faculty in 1989. I had trained at UCLA and then had gone to San Diego for a year. And I remember when he recruited me, I was in an operating room one evening because that's when I had my block time. It was from 3 to 11 because we had no block time in 1987. And he called me in the OR, and I called him back, and that's when he offered me the job to come back because I figured I could get some block time. And he also offered me an opportunity to do research and promote my career. He then also was my sponsor, which we've talked a lot about. He put me on a committee for the Association for Academic Surgery as he was recruiting me because he was the president of that society. He's also been past president of the Society of University Surgeons, and he's also past president of the Society of Surgical Chairmen. He also has served as the director of the American Board of Surgery, so very much into education, a member of the board of directors of the directors of the Society of Surgery of the Alimentary Tract, and he also is a member of the board of directors of the Collegium International Surgica Digestivia. And in 2008, he received the National Award for the Advancement of Women in Surgery from the Association of Women Surgeons, and he was chairman of the Board of Governors most recently with the American College of Surgeons from 2008 to 2010, and now is a regent. I was chair of the Board of Regents the last 2 years, so I actually was his boss as mentee as I ran the board. His career was begun as a great investigator and did a lot of work and was funded by the NIH. But if you look at his CV, right about at the time he moved from UCLA to the Brigham, he decided to become a mentor and bring others along besides himself. He established the Center for Surgery and Public Health in 2004 at the Brigham, a collaboration at the Harvard Medical School, really the first one to do that. And as you know, that's one of our aspirations here. And it really focused on healthcare quality, safety, and effectiveness in global surgical care. And Atul Gawande is one of his faculty. Therefore, he can mentor those that are out and about doing amazing things and those that stay home and do the work at home as well. His current interest is really looking at healthcare. So his CV is just full of all conversations and publications on healthcare reform. And he's very active in healthcare policy, and that's where I got my interest as I was finishing my chair decade, was to really work with healthcare policy, and as you know, that's why I came here. We have two manuscripts we published together. One is from when he hired me back when I was a neutrophil expert and looking at ischemia, reperfusion, and rivet hindlimbs, and so he's an expert on that. But the second one was just recently, 2 years ago. We published an article together in JAMA on the work hour issues, and so we've come around a little bit with our interests, and he's there again to sponsor me to publish in JAMA. He's also taught courses on healthcare at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University, and he was recently appointed an adjunct professor there. He's been on boards of several hospitals and healthcare systems across the country, and he's a member of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation National Advisory Committee beginning in 2013. His clinical interest is GI surgery. He's still a clinician. He enjoys practice, teaching residents and students, and he's run numerous teaching awards. So as I went through my career and when he recruited me back at 2.5 years when I was his faculty member, I got divorced. And I really felt that I needed to change my life and move back to Milwaukee. And for those chairs sitting here, you know what that means. At 2.5 years, I hadn't quite earned my keep as a new faculty member when I said I really need to leave. Now I realize as a chair what that meant, and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars he lost on me because I took off that way. But off I went back to Milwaukee and sort of regrouped my life, became chair of the VA there, and then went back to UCLA to be a division chief. And during that period of time, which was probably one of my toughest times, he was there encouraging me to do what I needed to do for me versus what I needed to do for him. And if I were to describe, that's what Michael does for so many, is to make sure our careers and our lives are superb, and what he does is just sponsor it and mentors it. He's never talked about mentorship, and when I called him, he said that really wasn't something he wanted to do. However, all of you are learning that I'm very convincing at times. I'm also relentless, and I also think he has a story he needs to tell because he's been doing mentorship for 20 years of all kinds of people, healthcare, surgeons, famous, those out on the media, everywhere. And he also understands what it means to have been there, and he hasn't forgot how tough it is to manage the conflict between being a clinician, a researcher, a teacher, and an administrator. He always is there to talk to me. I've used him as a mentor for me for years. I've asked him numerous questions and had his advice on everything I've done. And he's always been there as a friend and a mentor, and I consider myself extremely lucky to have known him in the way we did. And I have offered jobs to people in operating rooms because I imagine I'm him, and that works really well, to let you know, is to call up and say, would you like a job, especially if they're late at night and the case is going poorly. If you call up and said, would you like a new job? Yes, I want a new job. I want it now. And I remember when I got off that phone, I looked at that bleeding aneurysm and said, you know what, we'll finish this, but I've got better places to go later. So here's Dr. Zinner, and thanks again so much for coming to visit us.
Well, Julie, you've taken up half my time, so. And where are my grandchildren when when they want to know what Grandpa does, other than digging for worms? So I'm going to tell a story, and it's going to be my story. So if this sounds overly narcissistic, I apologize, but let me show you why. All right. So first disclosure: I've known her for 25 years. That's the only disclosure I think I need to make. I've been a chairman now for 26 years, and I've learned some lessons, and I'm going to share some of those with you. One, be home and stay visible. Now, a lot of my colleagues think they need to be international travelers. I kind of eschewed that. I really do believe your job when you are in a leadership position is to stay home and be visible. Second, manage up and manage down equally well. If you show favoritism, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And for me personally, I haven't discovered any genes. I haven't invented an operation. I haven't done more of something than anybody else. And I want to leave a legacy of just the people that I had the fortune of mentoring. So you've all seen this slide, who was a mentor, in Greek mythology. I'm going to spare you that. But as I was growing up, the distinction between a mentor and a role model became very apparent to me, and that a mentor truly has to be invested in the outcome of the mentee. And that's a critical part of what we need to be doing. So, my story. I learned to be a mentor by success and failure, and then success, and then failure, over again and over again. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to have mentors at many places along the road that saved me from oblivion. So let's go back. Here I was in high school, Coral Gables High School, public high school, 950 in a graduating class. I mean, there were more people in my homeroom than some of the elite schools in the Northeast. I was a National Honor Society winner. I was a quintessential geek. I mean, I swear to God, couldn't be more geeky in my entire life. What do I mean by that? Here I am in the chemistry club. Here I am in the honor society. Here I am in the junior classical league. And let me tell you about something. So some of you may be old enough to have remembered something called the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. It was started in 1942, and then in 1999 it switched name from Westinghouse to Intel. And it's kind of the Super Bowl of high school science. So at the age of 15, as a sophomore in South Florida, I built a digital computer out of pinball machines. One of my best friends was in the amusement business, and our father was in the amusement business, and so I took all these pinball machines, and I don't know how I did it, but I built a computer, a digital computer. And if you think about, that's an era way before there were transistors and way before there were real computers, and I'll show you those in a minute. But anyway, so I won at age 15 the South Florida Science Fair. And these are my parents, and so I'm a hotshot now. Okay, I am really a hotshot. And then in my senior year, I'm a semifinalist in this Westinghouse Science Talent Search. Again, so I'm doing great, sailing along. So I then enrolled, by the way, I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Miami. I never left Miami until I was 18 and went away to college. And then I thought I'd moved up north when I moved to Baltimore. And then I discovered that's actually not the north, but it took me a while to get there and find that out. So I go to Johns Hopkins. I'm living in the, in the dorms the first year. And then by the second year, I did everything you're not supposed to do. Rebellious, not paying attention at all to academics. I joined the drama group, that's the Barnstormers. I was in the play The Fantastics. We were going to do summer stock. I became the chief announcer at the radio station. I joined a fraternity, and everything went to hell in a handbasket. So by the second semester of my sophomore year, I had taken first-year German so many times, I thought I was going to major in first-year German. At the end of my sophomore year, I also had 15 other D credits, and I was going to do summer stock. My father, who was paying the bills, decided that wasn't a very good idea, and so he pulled me out of college, and in my junior year, he sent me to the University of Miami. So I told everyone I was spending my junior year abroad, and I was at the University of Miami. Now, I don't remember a whole lot. I don't know whether you've ever been to the University of Miami, but it's very open air, very breezy. And what I remember, all I remember is biochemistry lab. Again, open air. The lab was always just next to a corridor with vending machines. And in those days, as they were giving, they gave us the reagents. One of the early reagents they gave us was absolute alcohol, not denatured, absolute alcohol, and all the vending machines were right outside. So what I remember about biochemistry lab may have been a little different than what they wanted me to remember about biochemistry lab. Anyway, I succeeded enough to get back to Baltimore for my senior year. And that's when my fortunes really, really changed, because I was not a very motivated student. I obviously had screwed up. And I met a guy who was then a junior faculty member. Oh, by the way, I graduated and was in the engineering school, not pre-med, but engineering school. So I met a junior faculty member who became my mentor. He taught computer sciences. And for those old enough in this room to remember what computer sciences were in the 60s, that was Fortran and punch cards, and Dr. Stephen Wolf, who was a junior faculty member, became my mentor. A slight digression. So this is what it looked like. The machine, my iPhone has more memory than these machines did back in 1966. But my mentor was an assistant professor at the time, and he became one of the fathers of the internet. And he was a wonderful, great man. He left Hopkins. He directed the National Science Foundation first interconnected network in 1985, and he really was in the Internet Hall of Fame, and a wonderful human being. And he taught me, he gave me the confidence to do a senior thesis, which most undergraduates did not do. Now, I'm not going to go into, but this is what I did as a senior thesis. It's essentially related, so zero crossing analysis and shot noise, it was related to radar, and that if you send out a ping, you'll get some noise back, and the Navy was very interested in how to cut out the kind of noise it is. And this was a particular project. I learned a lot, but what mostly I learned from this mentor, the ability to think critically, the ability to solve problems, to be able to be a linear thinker, instilled a very new work ethic in me. The only way you could get access, I could get access to these computers, was from midnight till 6 a.m. Going to sound familiar to a surgical training program, but because everybody else was demanding it. And the way I really got access was I would bribe the midnight operators with pizzas and subs and whatever I needed to do to get the work done. But this guy gave me renewed self-confidence and the ability to fail and recover. So as you will hear again a little bit down the road here, success is never a straight line. And this mentor pulled me out of the can. Great irony. Finished as an engineer. This year, I was invited back to Hopkins School of Engineering to give the commencement address. Now, when the dean called me from the School of Engineering, I said, "You sure you got the right guy? Because I haven't been an engineer since I left here." He said, "No," and I gave something like this to the School of Engineering. All right, next step. So now I've recovered. I'm going off to the University of Florida, Gainesville, Shands Teaching Hospital. And this is where I lived my first year. So this is me on a motorcycle. I lived in a single wide trailer. Most of you may not know what a single wide is, but it ain't very big. And this is what the trailer looked like. And this is truly the trailer. The trailer was so small that I had to turn sideways in my bed and my feet were in the closet. And I shared it with another medical student. So it was an auspicious beginning. But I had a mentor. And this was a guy who was the dean of students, a wonderful, wonderful guy who really cared about students. He taught me diligence and hard work, again, confidence, integrity, and compassion. And why compassion? Because I screwed up again, and he kept me. How did I screw up? Well, if any of you ever been to Shands Teaching Hospital, you know there's this great circular driveway that leads into the main lobby of the hospital. So my trailer mate, who was also a motorcyclist, we decided to take a study break one night. Well, let's go out for a beer. Well, I don't remember how many more later, but as we're driving back down toward the trailer, we passed by Shands circular driveway. I don't know what got into us, but we drove our motorcycles into the lobby, and the electric doors only opened one way. So here I am trying to explain to Dean the next day, what are we doing in the lobby at midnight with the doors wide open? So the reason I say thank you is he kept me. Much to everybody's surprise, I graduated AOA. And so once again, screwed up, made some success because somebody pulled me out of the dumpster. Right, now I'm off to Hopkins, and back in those days, it was a steep, steep pyramid. So we had 22 general surgery interns and only 2 finished in general surgery. And so everybody at Hopkins, including Gainesville, said, "Zinner, you're there for 2 years. That's it. Coming back home after that," because they're not going to appreciate somebody from a hick town like Gainesville. But I also met several mentors who helped me along the way. One was the chairman then, George Zeidema, who's now retired and living in Michigan. One was a guy named John Cameron. His first year on the faculty was my internship year. And Julie and I know him. Many of the surgeons will know him very well. John is an internationally recognized great surgeon. But I can tell you, he wasn't always an internationally known great surgeon. In fact, he was slow as hell. So we would take 17 hours to do a Whipple. And what are you doing? I had to sitting on the hooks, for 17 hours. And that's all I remember about that experience. The other guy who was a very well-known man, David Skinner, chairman of the Department of Surgery at Chicago, and then president of New York Hospital, and the guy who put together New York Hospital and Columbia, and has passed away several years ago, but a great influence. My mentor when I left Hopkins and went to UCLA was this wonderful, wonderful man named Bill Longmire. And so what did I learn from all of these mentors? What did I learn about how to become a mentor? Well, I learned that there are different styles in mentoring. And I had the opportunity to watch a little bit of both in my career. So let me be serious a minute about mentoring. It's a deliberate, proactive act. It's not passive. It's the activity of just-in-time, in vivo coaching in which the actions can be linked to outcomes. It is to influence, guide, and support in order to help another do a better job or progress in their career. And mentors, as I said, must be truly vested in the outcomes because it involves a true relationship. Some of the critical success factors that I think of: structured, proactively thought, time commitment, and must include the needs of the faculty And this is one of the things I learned along the way, which is women, minorities, and families specifically. So let me tell you about my experience in women in surgery. So it's been an arc in my development. In 1971, I became an intern at Johns Hopkins. There was one woman, 22 interns. In 1980, I finished the super chief year at Johns Hopkins. 0 women had finished the program at that point. And it wasn't until 2003 that at Johns Hopkins, the first woman was made a professor of surgery in the department. Now, in contradistinction, 1988, I went to be chief of surgery at UCLA. This is 1988. 5 out of the 6 interns that first year were women. I thought the faculty was going to kill me. I really did. It was such a challenging environment back then, but it's obviously significantly different. So this is 1990. I went there in 88. And I'm very proud to say who these folks are. So Julie, you know, Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, and Dean. Terry Buckmiller is co-director of the Colorectal Center at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard. Rena Wong's in private practice. Kristen Skinner is now Chief of Surgical Oncology at Rochester, in University of Rochester. Kim Olthoff is a professor of surgery in the Division of Transplantation at Children's Hospital in Penn. Kelly Hunt is a professor in the Department of Surgical Oncology at MD Anderson. And Karen Johnson-Jones is in orthopedics at San Antonio. So couldn't be prouder, just couldn't be prouder. Now, this is an update this week. So this is Terry Buckmiller on one side and Kristen Skinner on the other, and we reunite at these college meetings on a regular basis. So let me make a slight digression here. So I have had the fortune of working in the kitchen as a line chef for many famous, really famous surgeons. It's called a stagiaire, which is actually to be a mentee of the mentor in the kitchen. Who are they? That's Thomas Keller in the French Laundry, with me working in the kitchen with him. Danielle Ballou of Café Ballou and Danielle. Eric Ripert, who is at La Bernardin, and worked with him for several weeks. And it was unusual enough that about 10 years ago, the New York Times thought, whoa, isn't that interesting? It's chief of surgery. By the way, they didn't know who I was at any of those places, because I didn't want to be considered different than the folks working in the line. But I made the front page of the dining out section of the New York Times with Eric Ripert. I now own 2 restaurants. One is Toro, a Spanish tapas restaurant. And by the way, when my barber, Joe, said, I hear you got a restaurant. What kind of I said, it's a tapas restaurant. He said, Doc, is there much call for a topless restaurant in Boston? I said, no, it's a tapas restaurant. And the other one is small plate Italian called Copa. Now, I've had many important patrons come through to help support me in my retirement years, and I want to thank Julie for that opportunity. All right, so what have I observed? There are many, many parallels between a traditional French kitchen and surgery. Now, most of us grew up when there was an intense hierarchy in the surgical training program. Chief resident only got spoken to by the senior resident, only got spoken, down the road. So there's that kind of hierarchy in the kitchen. We both deal with sharp instruments. And by the way, if you work as a line chef in the kitchen, you bring your own knives. You do not touch another person's knives. It's like using someone else's toothbrush. You do not touch anybody else's knives. There is long hours on your feet, and there is this concept of mise en place, which is everything in its place. And it's also been challenging for women to succeed. The next thing that I learned in the comparisons was the kitchen during meal service is like an OR with a ruptured aneurysm. It's excitement, speed, tension, pressure, occasional yelling. It's like the heat in the kitchen. And finally, where I grew up, or how I grew up, and when I grew up, with women in the profession. So let me give you a couple of guidelines that I use for effective mentoring. One, have a clear, agreed-upon purpose and plan. Set objectives, have strategies for achieving them, and have a timeline. Have agreed-upon roles for each of the mentors. So when I recruit a junior faculty, I actually make it very clear to them both a business plan and an academic plan. And so in the business plan, using our experience, we target volume, we talk about salaries, we talk about, it's totally transparent. Every dime that comes in gets cost accounted for. Every revenue, every expense gets cost accounted for. So they know exactly where they are all the time. In the academic plan, I tell them what we expect in terms of publications or grants or titles, and we assign a mentor. Now, the mentor will often change depending upon the interest of the particular recruit, but this is spelled out explicitly before they come in the offer letter. Set up and stick to a meeting schedule, particularly with your mentors. Do it on a regular basis. Keep it confidential. It's not anybody else's business what you and your mentor deal with, and vice versa. And then develop communication mechanisms. And I'll use another film example of communication mechanisms. So communicate often and openly, establish trust, see each other as individuals. You, the mentor, take initiative, publicly support the proteges and help them expand professional networks, and most importantly, understand those boundaries that need to exist. You're not their friend, you're their mentor, and keep that consistent. Measure your progress. It's business. And then lastly, say goodbye. Once the protege is beginning to be successful, back off and let the sun shine them. Bask in reflected glory. If they're recruited away, celebrate it. Don't retaliate. We have seen many times the opposite of that, and you look terrible if that's the case. It's built on the line of Sir Isaac Newton's, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. But you don't want it to be, if I have not achieved my goals, it's because giants are standing on my shoulders. Not the way to mentor. So these were my mentors when I got to the Brigham. Dr. John Manick, a true legend in the development of vascular surgery, and Dr. Francis Franny Moore, who was one of the true legends of surgical leadership, having been at the Brigham since the mid-40s. So what are the things I've taken away? Mentor by example. Do it yourself. And let me show you. If you're going to be a surgical leader, you have to be able to be in the operating room. You've got to show the folks that you can do it also. And so whatever your profession is, if you're going to be a leader there, you have to do it. Secondly, you've got to involve yourself with all of the trainees that you have. So these are didactics, give chairman rounds once a week, be there, show up, be visible. Specific recognition for the role of women in surgery. So starting in I came to the Brigham in 1994. Starting in 1999, I established a lectureship for women leaders in surgery for the women in my program. It's a 2-night affair, and during the day, and the 2 dinners originally, the first night was supposed to be for women on the faculty and residents only with the woman leader, and Julie was kind enough to be one of them, and the second night was to be for general faculty. So the first night, since I'm paying for it, I thought, well, I'll go to the dinner. I was disinvited. So I couldn't go to the one with the women. And, it was a good idea because it was an opportunity for the women in my program to understand that work-life balance that I couldn't understand because it was never something I had to deal with. We've had, this year, we had Diane Simeone as we changed the name of the lectureship to Nina Brunwald. For some of you who did know who Nina Brunwald was, she was the first woman cardiac surgeon in the country and was married to Jean Brunwald. This spring, we also had Barbara Bass come as our our most visible lectureship, and here she is with our chief residents. Attention to diversity, particularly in the faculty and outside. So several years ago, Selwyn Rogers and I put on a program for disparities in surgical care, and it has become part of our program. We now have as part of our program also a global health, a global surgery part where we send residents to sub-Saharan Africa as part of our initiative in disparities. And lastly, holiday events are for family and their children centered. Starting in 1996, when I came in '94, the departmental holiday party was held at some exclusive country club, and everybody came in black tie, and it was terrible. So starting in 1996, we changed that, and we made it so that we have children's crafts. We have a big enough space that one side of the room is for children's crafts, and we hire people to be kind of babysitters and do crafts with them and build things and color. And on the other side of the room is where the bar is, and that's where the adults go, but they know they can safely leave their children on the side. So all these little kids come. Last year we had about 400 people, 150 children, all of them dressed up, beautiful little outfits. These are, this is some of the pictures of the kids doing crafts at the holiday event. And everybody in the department and everybody now in the hospital wants to come to our event because they bring their kids. And as you can see, the kids get all dressed up in their party dresses. We've also done events that are summer events at our house in Marion. And again, family-oriented. We hire clowns, and we hire magicians. We make sure that the faculty can bring their children, and it's very, very family-oriented. Other examples of mentorship. About once a month, we'll take out the junior residents, and I use the same pattern with junior faculty. I'm sorry, not junior residents, junior faculty and the PGY years. So here's the deal. I've told you about my interest in food and wine. So let's take the residents. So every year, across the board, like PGY 1 all the way through 5, they get to pick the restaurant, they get to pay for dinner, but I pay for everything we drink, and I'm not going to drink bad wine. They do very well. They do very well in that circumstance. So here's my most recent, my chief resident class this year. I'm glad I'm not showing the labels on the wine, but we did very well at a very, very nice restaurant. And that's for every PGY year. And so the rules of engagement for that is after a couple of bottles of wine, you're allowed to ask any questions you want to know about the department. And then I get to ask them any questions about their lives. So it's a fair balance. Other examples, I have monthly meetings with division chiefs. I support a timeout for advanced degrees, MPH, PhD, and MBA. We've had the faculty develop their own academic incentive plans, and we've built institution-wide leadership programs for middle-level faculty at the Harvard Business School. And this is an example of the curriculum of one of the faculty leadership courses that we support people to go to. Now, I thought about showing you the mentees, but I really can't. And I stopped counting. I've had the privilege of seeing now more than 20 division chiefs, 3 department chairmen, 4 named chairs, 4 major program leaders, 4 COOs or CMOs, 1 associate editor at JAMA, 2 editors-in-chief, 1 director of the NSQIP, and one co-director now of the ABS, and now I can proudly say one dean and one vice chancellor. But of all the people I've had a chance to mentor, and as a parent, you know you can't pick one child, but if I can talk about one mentee, this is a guy I met as a fourth-year medical student named Atul Gawande. And I'm not sure what I saw in him, but I saw the ability for him to make a difference in the world that most of us mere mortals can't. And so I successfully recruited him into our internship, supported his MPH when he went to the Harvard School of Public Health, flew air cover for him when he was writing his articles for The New Yorker, proofread his first book, and now he's written 3 books, and he is just a remarkable individual. I would say he's probably the best known surgeon in this country, and he has moved the needle more than anyone, and I'm privileged to say that he and I used to work together. So he's done very, very well. So I'm going to end with this. A mentor's effect ripples through eternity. One can never know where their influence stops. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Great, that was excellent. Of course, it's okay to take a few questions.
I certainly will.
Yeah. So I have a few questions for Dr. Zinner about his style of mentorship. You cannot ask anything about me, so that's not fair. We'll put that on the table to do questions.
I can tell you things about Julie. That would curdle your urine.
I know. Mine first.
Mike, as time has gone on, do you find yourself shunning more surgeons into a side career in health policy or management of health plans or that type of thing?
As my interests have changed, so has my ability to mentor. So I started out as an NIH investigator, and so my mentees were translational scientists. And I kept that grant for about 14 years. And then I became more, having moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, when I was in LA in the 80s and 90s, I suddenly became interested in healthcare finance because that was what was going on in the managed care area. So I'd taken a job as a chairman in 1988 at the young age of 42, and I didn't know anything about finance. I knew, for example, that the term accounts receivable was really important, but I didn't know what it was. So that's when I became interested in kind of healthcare finance. And then as I moved to the East Coast back again, I became much more interested in policy. And so the Center for Surgery and Public Health, which I started 10 years ago, we deal with policy, we deal with health services research, and we deal with global surgery, all of which are my current interests. So as my interests have changed, I think it's also reflected in the trainees. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there are fewer and fewer of our trainees who feel comfortable going into the translational sciences or going into bench research because it's hard, and the competitive market today for funding is steeply serious.
I have a question about what if you have a mentor-mentee relationship that's going poorly and you're not seeing eye to eye. When you said goodbye, I thought you might go there, but that was mainly to let them shine, which you do so well to let go. But when it's not going well, either yourself or you have one that's going awry that you see between maybe a senior faculty member and a younger one, or between a junior faculty, how do you diagnose it? How do you treat it? And how do you make it change without people feeling badly about the interaction?
So I've had that happen several times, as recently as this year. And how do I hear about it? Well, I begin to hear about it from those around the mentee, not the mentor. And as I bring the mentee in, we talk about it, we're pretty straight about it. And then either one of two things happen. Either I have kind of a come to Jesus talk with a mentor, and threaten them with something, or I get another mentor. But you'd be surprised how threats work when in that circumstance, particularly if you've established You know, they've established, as I said, you establish expectations. And if neither side are meeting those expectations, then leaders have responsibility to let them know. And I do.
Is it usually time that they won't give, or are they trying to steal credit from the mentee, or what's the most common reason it doesn't?
All the above.
All those to do.
Yeah.
Great. Mark?
Well, actually, Julie stole my question because that's all right. I'll add to it because I really did enjoy your reflection on the importance of success and failure in your own narrative and your professional development. And I was thinking about how sometimes the mentor-mentee relationship is not successful, doesn't work. And I wonder if you could comment on the strategy of allowing those relationships to sort of find each other organically within a department or a school versus imposing them in a structured way through a sort of programmatic plan. It seems that that's a very tricky balance in terms of how to put the two together effectively, and I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
So on new recruits, particularly junior faculty, usually the mentor that's listed in the offer letter is either the division chief or section chief, knowing full well that that won't be the person they end up with, or may not be the person they end up with. And, they sort of find others of like interest, whatever that is, and that relationship evolves over time. I think that's a critical issue, that it doesn't need to be static. It needs to get started. It needs to get launched. It needs to set expectations, but it's going to change. It's going to change.
Other questions for Michael? Yeah, Chris?
That's very nice. You focus mostly on what I assume is the clinical mentor. What about for the ones going into scientific agendas, whether it's health services or translational basic science? There you're really going to have to step out of your own department to find the right mentor for a K award and onward. And that strikes me as actually one of the more challenging areas because you're really matching outside of your own control area of.
It's part of my job. So I'm recruiting right now a surgeon scientist who has an R award, R1. And I don't know enough about his specialty. So I'm shopping him around to the chief of pathology, Ed Benz, who's the director of the cancer center at the Dana-Farber, to other basic science departments or in the medical center. I don't know where he's going to land, but he's going to need something that's not it's not something I do. So I literally have shopped him around. I've had people call him. They've had bi-directional talks about what kind of lab he would need, what kind of space, where he'd like to be, what kind of work he'd be doing, what kind of collaborators he would like to have. Part of the responsibility.
And how do you do the finances of that as you put that together? You take more of you want him, so you're going to help pay that. It's going to be a certain time. Do you have an MOU between these people to know where that is? And how do you do the time to do that? How do you manage the protected time and the ability for that person to be successful?
So everyone gets a period to start off not being financially successful. And that period of time is defined. The support is built into the letter. So I ask for a wish list, and there may be A through J. Well, we can do A through D. And there's a fixed period of time for that. And one of the hardest things that I have to do as a surgical chairman is I'm not a state-supported. There's $0, virtually $0 that come from the medical school. So I live and die on my bottom line. And most of that bottom line is driven, as you know, by clinical revenues. But there are people who don't necessarily have that kind of clinical revenue generation. And the toughest thing I have to deal with among the scientists is that the surgeon scientists want to do science, and we give them the opportunity, and we give them the space, and we give them the support, but they also want to be paid as surgeons. So I don't get any choice in that matter. So we talk about those kind of things. I can't, unlike other places, I can't say I'm going to set everybody at 75th percentile double AMC or the other one, M&A, well, the other one, because I don't have a revenue source for that. And I can, and as I learned when I went to UCLA, you can't spend more than you bring in. Because so
Rule number one.
I'm not trying to dodge the question, but it's a fundamental one because there are different roles. Now, we, over the last 5 years, have developed an academic incentive plan where everybody contributes off the top, and then those who are doing either more teaching or more research or other things kind of get it on the back end. But, you know, it's transparent, so everybody knows every dollar, and it's not, and so far, I haven't been fired. So I've said this publicly. A new chairman who comes in to change the practice plan gets the opportunity to change the practice plan only twice, either when they're coming in or when they're going out, and sometimes they're related.
And actually, the reason I asked him that, he's written about that. And actually, I adopted that a few years after I got to Hopkins, where it's really a tax that goes into an academic bucket that you decide, that everybody decides we're going to do that, and it helps support outcomes research or whatever you all decide to do. Right. And it can be anywhere from 1%, some people go up to 5%, but it is an opportunity to create a fund to do it if you get buy-in.
So our new floor is 5%, and we leave it up to the divisions, minimal 5%. And then some divisions are going up to 20%. Now, I'm letting the divisions do that, right?
God bless. It wasn't your idea.
No, floor was my idea, so we're coming up to 5%.
Gary?
So sometimes, you know, once you've gotten to know the person you're mentoring, you realize that the direction they see themselves going in life is not necessarily the direction that will lead to success for them. But they're good people, hardworking. And the challenge oftentimes is trying to direct them to a place where they'll be successful. Right. So how have you managed that? Have you done it solo? Have you brought other people in, et cetera?
No, I've brought other people in, and particularly in whatever area of expertise they are in. And as I mentioned briefly in a conversation with you just before this, in my department, if you will, my stable has both Clydesdales and Thoroughbreds. And you can decide which is which, but I need both of them working in the department. And sometimes a Thoroughbred, let me rephrase, sometimes a Clydesdale think they're a Thoroughbred. And one of the heart-to-hearts you have to say is, that's not in your future. You can talk the talk, but you haven't walked the walk. And we have to change direction.
I think that's where it helps to have that constant communication, because you've done that with me, you know, telling me exactly what I could and couldn't do and where you want to go. I think I've done it back to you a couple of times too, but I think that is a real important discussion, that if you have constant communication, you then can have a tough conversation because you're always talking to someone versus calling them in and then telling them something bad. Other comments, questions? Well, we so appreciate you being here today. I have a little sample of things to take home, a bag from UC Davis, a hat from UC Davis, the mentoring book. All of you got the free mentoring book, and we can do this. It's a great book. It's simple, 10 quick steps to mentoring, so we appreciate that. And we have some refreshments outside the door for all of us, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.